Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. You know, in a sermon this week, Pope Francis suggested we tie cement shoes to the banksters and throw them into the East River. Of course, I paraphrase. His exact words may have been slightly more nuanced, but the gist was the same, in my opinion. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, Vu Ca Cao, the former general director of Agribank Financial, faces the death penalty for embezzling 533 billion dong. That's about $25 million. Chop, chop for Vu Van Kok. And how? Also this week, a former U.S. Fed official confessed to complaining or committing some horrific, deadly money-printing sins. Many more dongs than 530 billion were embezzled from the American people, according to Andrew Hutzar, who admitted to a gruesome bond-buying spree that had financially butchered Main Street America, their bloated carcasses fed to the gluttonous fiat money changers and derivative devils on Wall Street. I'm sorry, said the repentant quantitative easer. Oh. Alas, Andrew, the Pope, has spoken, and he says Harry's of London does a nice line of cement shoes. Oh, that's lovely.
Max, well, the Pope headline reads as follows: Pope Francis, corruption fury, tie them to a rock and throw them in the sea. He was talking about corrupt officials. Whether or not he was speaking about the church or government officials, it's open to interpretation. But I think your cement shoe quote came from the King Keiser version of the Bible.
Oh, right. You know, remember over there at Goldman Sachs, you had the head of the CEO saying he does God's work, Lloyd Blankfein. Well, apparently the Pope, who is the God's bishop on earth, begs to differ, didn't he? He's saying that the Lloyd Blankfein should be thrown into the river with a stone tied to his neck.
If these politicians and these governments aren't going to enforce justice, then they want some vigilante old-style justice.
Well, the Bible is replete with instances of this type of vigilantism in the greater interest of the greater good by the greater being, and that's why people like Blankfein and Jamie Dimon, according to the Pope,
Honey, that's
according to the Pope.
That's according to the King Keiser interpretation.
What? He just said he'd tie a rock to their necks and throw them in the river.
Well, Andrew Hussar, Confessions of a Quantitative Easer, was another headline, and he's apologized to the American population, saying the bond buying scheme of the quantitative easing did not help Main Street, and in fact that the Fed continues to push this line that it's helping Main Street, when he realized after a year of bond buying on behalf of the Fed, he realized that in fact it was only helping Wall Street. Now, he notes that the Fed may have created and spent over $4 trillion for a total return of as little as 0.25% of GDP, i.e. a mere $40 billion bump in U.S. economic output for $4 trillion.
Well, gets back to what we were saying last week. $18 billion of debt for $1 of GDP, or trillions of dollars worth of quantitative easing for a minuscule amount of GDP pumping, as it were. And so this is the mathematics and the economics just simply don't add up. And as we've been saying on this show for years, the quantitative easing programs are purely meant to bail out banksters and to keep solvent banks that should be declared insolvent, and to keep whole bankers that should be, what's the word, vivisected. I haven't used that one in a while. Vivisection of banksters like Jamie Dimon and Lloyd Blankfein to comply with the greater good as exemplified by the bishop on earth there, Pope Francis.
The other thing he points out is that quantitative easing, of course, did help Wall Street because banking shares are up triple, but also just 0.2% of banks now control more than 70% of U.S. bank assets.
Well, the too big to fail banks got even bigger. The mergers and acquisitions in that space accelerated using free money at 0% interest for the banks, and you end up with this financial apartheid. I'd like to see the Pope Francis come out against financial apartheid, where you have low interest rates for those who are committing fraud, and high interest rates for somebody who's trying to work for a living or save money for a living. That's a financial apartheid wall driven by interest rates. Where's Pope Francis on this? Pope, I know you're not a dope, so see if you can't do something more than just scrub yourself with soap. Say something about this.
Quantitative easing has not only helped Wall Street. According to the City AM today in the UK, 1.6 trillion, the shocking amount that governments have gained from quantitative easing. This is for the US, UK, and Eurozone governments. They've saved 1.6 trillion in debt servicing fees. But who has lost out? The big losers. They point out households have lost 630 billion in interest payments on their savings and pensions, and foreign investors in bonds have lost 710 billion. And they also say that the biggest loser of all has been insurance industry, the life insurance industry, and that if quantitative easing continues for much longer, they actually may be put out of business.
Oh, we made that point before. Artificially low interest rates threatens the insurance industry. They need at least a 4 or 5% return on their capital to keep the insurance industry viable. And by artificially keeping rates near zero, you're putting the entire insurance industry out of business potentially, which eliminates all pretense of having anything like private property. Private property is based on having the insurance to cover the private property. And we said in the UK that several £100 billion was ripped out of the bank accounts of savers and workers and put into the bank accounts of speculators and financial terrorists. And now City AM, the conservative newspaper here in the UK, is confirming that the UK, the US, and Europe have ripped $1.6 trillion. This comes when people are suffering austerity. It's because $1.6 trillion, according to City AM, was ripped out of their bank accounts and given to suicide bankers with derivatives strapped to their vest, derivative vests that explode with financial weapons of mass financial destruction. Thanks to guys like Mark Carney, Janet Yellen, Ben Bernanke, 1.6 trillion in financial explosives exploded in the face of people all over these continents, and now they're a lot poorer for it, and it's getting worse.
That's the problem. See, you have Andrew Hussar, who used to be a Fed official, doing the bond buying schemes for the Fed. And he's saying that this is a disaster for Main Street. But when you see the amount of money the governments are making, and then they become addicted to it, just like Saudi Arabia becomes addicted to high oil prices. They cannot suffer any oil prices lower than 80 because of all their schemes that they've built based on $100 oil. So the same thing here is like, can we ever get rid of this? And I think the tweet that went around the world, the image that went around the world was, this is a picture of the UK Prime Minister calling for a permanent culture of austerity. Seriously, look at the photo. Of course, he's saying this in total splendor, surrounded by gold chairs and gold goblets. And here's a picture of his audience. As you see, everybody looks resplendent in their finery, and he was calling right there for a permanent culture of austerity. What he really means is this permanent culture of 0% interest rates.
Well, Cameron is the London whale. Yeah. I think that picture proves it. This guy Hussar, who is the former FOMC participant who's now blowing the whistle on the central banking system, he's doing a Tony Blair. Remember, after Tony Blair murdered, by some estimates, by the Lancet, 1 million innocent Iraqis, he went to Jesus. He became a Catholic. He went to the Pope and said, I'm ready to join Jesus, and please absolve me from my genocide. That was Tony Blair's appeal to the Pope. Now this guy, Hussar, wants to say the same thing. I was participating in $1.6 trillion worth of financial terrorism, and I murdered people when I was at the Federal Open Market Committee. Will Jesus have me now, Pope? Pope, will Jesus have me now? And the Pope is saying, hey, dudes, guess what? According to the Bible, you should strap a rock onto your neck and jump in the river and go down and swim with the fishes, because you're a sinful, guilty
Again, you paraphrase, of course, what the Pope
No,
is
that's
saying.
what the Pope says. On the internal documents over at the Vatican, which I've seen, he's saying, Tony Blair's a frickin'
Also in the news this week was Mark Carney, the head of the Bank of England here, and he said house price rises are actually just reflection of people's expectations of higher wages in future. Utter bollocks, says Nick Trace. Of course, we know that's not true because for 40 months straight, incomes in the UK have been declining after inflation, which is running at 2.7% or 2.2% now. Wages were up 0.7%. So as you see, they're losing out to inflation.
Mark Carney is, he just lies, basically. He lies. He's full of lies. He's saying that house prices are going up because people expect house prices to go up. He doesn't mention the fact that he's running the Bank of England printing press at full tilt, that he wants to take bank assets from 400% of GDP to 900% of GDP, that he's in league with the terrorists, okay? Again, I hate to, belabor the point, but if you look up financial terrorists in the dictionary, there is a picture of Mark frickin' Carney with a hockey puck stuck to his forehead and a big, kielbasa, dangling from his lip, or whatever it is they eat up there in Canada, maple sugar. What is it up there?
Well,
ganja?
Well, yeah, he says that British people expect their wages to increase, not just their house prices. Now, all of this stuff is talking about...
Why would he say they expect their wages to increase?
That's what I asked you!
But because there's no basis to expect their wages to increase. It's like you just said about Saudi Arabia. If they want the wages to increase for people living in Saudi Arabia, they pump more oil. Does that make the wages in Saudi Arabia go up? No. If Mark Carney pumps more money at the Bank of England, wages don't go up because there's no connection. There's no connection. You need to go to the hospital, buddy, and have your brain surgery because whatever that puck was that severed the cerebellum in such a way is you can't even think straight.
Well, speaking of oil, we're also going to connect to the back door that Andrew Hussar says was provided a backdoor bailout to Wall Street. There are, of course, backdoors installed throughout the internet. And remember, we have all this NSA spying, well, connected to this permanent austerity for the peasants and a largesse for the top. Australian spy agency helped BHP negotiate trade deals. BHP Billiton is, of course, the largest resource company in the world. They produce all sorts of minerals, resources, oil. BHP was among the companies helped by Australian spy agencies as they negotiated trade deals with Japan, a former Australian Secret Intelligence Service officer said. They also spoke to a former diplomat for Australia, Professor Gregory Clark, and he confirms that business information is a main target for intelligence agencies. The targeting is also highly corrupting since the information could be passed on selectively to cooperative firms, often firms that provide employment and cover for spy operatives.
Right. I mean, the world's population is overrun with crooks, spies, banking terrorists, and corporate espionage fools, right? So, who cares if a few thousand of them blow up on any given day? Okay, Stacey Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report. This has got a time to go.
I'm going to go check out those cement shoes at Harry's of London.
I think you'd look fine in a pair of cement shoes like that. All right, stay tuned for the second half, a whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to New York and speak with one of the, quote, 15 most dangerous people in the world, according to one survey, Mr. Cody Wilson. He's the founder and director of Defense Distributed, a nonprofit organization that develops and publishes open-source gun designs, so-called wiki weapons, suitable for 3D printing. The firm became internationally known in 2013 when it published the plans for the Liberator, a functioning pistol that could be reproduced with a 3D printer. Cody, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Max, it's a pleasure, man. It's been a while. I've looked forward to doing something like this with you.
Yes, great to have you on. Cody Wilson, you're famous for the Liberator, of course, but now you are seeking crowdfunding for your next project, Dark Wallet. So relating to the Bitcoin space, tell us about Dark Wallet.
Yeah, so Dark Wallet would be a thin wallet that would run in the browser as a browser extension. And then also it would basically include another layer of security, basically protections and protocols that don't really exist in current wallets. Among them most prominently, we're advocating for what we're calling trustless mixing, which is basically another layer of financial privacy and security that people can't really see what you're doing with your Bitcoin transactions.
Okay, let me jump in right there because we're jumping right into a pretty technical space here. So let's try to unpack this a little bit. So first of all, in the Bitcoin space, there are several divisions of labor, so-called, in the space. You've got the Bitcoin miners, you've got the Bitcoin transactors or merchant processors, and then you've got these Bitcoin wallets. This is where people store their Bitcoins. They've either acquired them through an exchange or they've mined them. So you guys, you and Amir Taki over there at Dark Wallet, you've come up with a wallet that you feel is going to be immune from any kind of prying eyes, or it's a safer wallet. What is a thin wallet? Describe what a thin wallet means.
Thin means that basically another set of servers handle the blockchain. So our client wouldn't be one where you have to wait for the entire blockchain to download or blocks and to be downloaded every time between transactions. You just do Bitcoin. So we imagine a more fluid and basically, kind of encapsulated user experience where you're not really, there's no interference with processing of the outside, rest of the protocol. You're just doing Bitcoin, and other servers are handling the rest of the experience kind of under the hood or behind the scenes.
Okay, so this would take care of one problem I've heard about Bitcoin, is that it eats up a lot of processing speed on your computer. So this thin wallet, so-called, would give you, that will solve that problem. You mentioned something else there about commingling funds or commingling Bitcoin, and this is a very important issue because Bitcoins are, each one is essentially numbered, you could say. And therefore, by making these coins mingled in a pool as part of the transaction, you have engineered another layer of anonymity, correct?
That's right, yeah. Basically, it's kind of a tactical thing, right? You're making it more difficult to forensically investigate, the certain routes of transactions, or to make it more difficult to triangulate who's spending what and where it's going. So we're mixing deterministic wallets where every single transaction you use comes from a new address, with a certain concept that mixes that with other people's addresses from maybe a trusted address book you have in a virtual lobby structure. I don't mean to make it sound complicated, but it's another way of doing Bitcoin mixing, which is really talked about, or coin join, which is talked about quite a bit. But the proof of concept is here, so we're really eager to integrate it into this wallet. Okay, so now, of course, you're known originally for the 3D gun, the wiki weapons, as they're called. And now you're into this new Bitcoin wallet. And of course, you're funding this project over another innovation, which is crowdfunding. There's a project up online. So you're really, Cody, living in a trifecta of disruptive technologies. It's really remarkable. I think you are the citizen of the future, perhaps, but you're crowdfunding this project. Tell us about that. Oh, I don't like to use that word anymore. It's become, just a piece of advertisement used by, Hollywood liberals and everybody. Oh, disruption, well, whatever. You'll come and call me if it's disruptive, right? Like with the gun. But yeah, we see basically this whole stable of technologies. Look at how they kind of enable relatively weak and small marginal groups of people to affect their dreams or implement their strategies and put them into the world, through the internet. So I guess, I don't know, you can't really say it's intentional, but yeah, we did 3D printing, we're doing Bitcoin. And by the way, I've been a Bitcoin enthusiast for a while now. Where we see opportunities now, we see that we have the leverage and perhaps the visibility to do our projects and acquire the money. Just recently, just yesterday, I told it up, and we've raised our complete goal for the funding of Dark Wallet. We've raised about $50,000. Bitcoin appreciation helped with that. But I mean, look, I had that campaign up for maybe 10 days, and we raised all the money.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about some of the political implications and philosophical implications of all this. Your innovation and the invention here with Dark Wallet and with the Liberator is putting you into practice what your ideal economic world looks like. Can you elaborate on what you hope Dark Wallet and Bitcoin are able to do to alter or affect or influence the current U.S. financial system? There's a political edge to this, Cody. Tell us about it and how that works.
So yeah, if you know anything about me, that's what makes me most eager to enter, this kind of fray, that there's this political and ideological division, but more specifically in Bitcoin right now, there's a kind of continual disavowal, or even the trustees of Bitcoin, in a sense, right at this foundation, kind of maintain this distance from what the practices that they're actually carrying out. I mean, if you're a lead engineer for a cryptocurrency, right, Satoshi's cryptocurrency, and you constantly disavow some of its like fundamental anarchist, tendencies, there's a difficulty and an anxiety, a kind of a gradient of fear that people are worried about. So we've entered the space to draw a line in the sand, to kind of ruin or corrupt some of the more mainstream messaging that we're starting to see from these Bitcoin entrepreneurs and other people. We want to say, look, Bitcoin will be this tool for anonymity, this kind of permanent gadfly on the current financial superstructure, and it's not just like Jaron Lukowitz, as some of these guys say. oh, it lowers transaction costs. It's great for banks. Kumbaya, it's good for everybody. No, there will be fundamental differences and divisions, and there's no way to avoid the conflict. And we're here to kind of force the conflict. We think Bitcoin is fundamentally subversive.
Right. So going back to the origins of Bitcoin, the manifesto, if you will, or some of the original comments made by the entity Satoshi Nakamoto, who is either an individual or a group of individuals responsible for the Bitcoin protocol, we know that they did leave behind some comments saying that they were upset or they had a huge issue with how the banking system worked, how the economy would work, that this was meant to bring in a new way of organizing an economy, a new currency, a new cryptocurrency. And of course, going back 3 years, 4 years ago, this was dominated by, I guess, what you could call almost a crypto punk community. I mean, deep hacker community, very small, very dedicated. And they consider themselves, I guess you could say, to be purists, whereas now, 3 years later, you have more of a commercial side of Bitcoin going on, and you have the Bitcoin Foundation, which is really the public face now of Bitcoin. Is this split between the purists, and maybe you can describe to me what would entail being a purist, is this, and the split with the more commercial side? Can you two guys, entities live, can you coexist? Is there going to be any kind of a growing rift, or is it just basically going to go down two parallel paths? Cody Wilson, your thoughts?
I know. I think your description is, of course, mainly good, valid, right? I think, of course, the two mentalities should exist, but one has tremendously more visibility and resources, and maybe it will always be that way. This is the story of the adoption of technology, right? It's kind of taken from a group of early adopters with a more communal and committed sense, and then it's adopted, and anyone can enter the space, and it can be for them what they want it to be. I want to be kind of clear about this. I'm not trying to say, no, Bitcoin must be this thing, and we want to take it away. I'm really more interested in complicating the messaging. As you might be aware, there's going to be some Senate hearings on the 18th about like, well, what are we going to do about this Bitcoin thing? Because the superpower is concerned, and I'm just I don't want there to be this kind of parade of the usual suspects saying, well, so long as we can preserve certain things for the United States, this is a beneficial technology. No, I really want to destroy and kind of corrupt this constant inertia toward a co-option and encapsulation of these technologies. It's okay to be eager for a subversive technology to challenge everything that you see. And I think that our message has less and less visibility. Just like in the other day, the Coinbase guy and some other guys are in the Times. They just wiped the Silk Road off the map, and it just seems that there's this narrative about how all of these, what we think more interesting stories are kind of, they're not getting the visibility that they deserve. I think Bitcoin means 1,000 Silk Roads, right? There will always be the Bitcoin Foundation and these interesting commercial players, but I think there will always also be these incredible black markets and the rise of the dark web, and we literally have no visibility.
Now, Cody, even just in the last 3 months, there's been a remarkable sea change, and we saw it with the revelations by Edward Snowden, who was able to blow the whistle on what the NSA is doing. And with what you're doing there with Dark Wallet, and of course with your the Liberator, which is the downloadable 3D printed gun, we also see it overlapping in New Zealand with Kim.com and his struggle to break free of the MPAA and other copyright cartel in America. The single word that ties all those things together is encryption. Suddenly, people understand that encryption is possibly the last defense against a total dictatorial surveillance police state. Your thoughts?
Yes, and even on our campaign page, I described it very much the same way. Encryption or anonymity as a human capacity is one of the only tools left in our kind of hyper-modern moment. One of the only implements left in the dwindling garrisons of liberty. I believe that's how I described it. If you can't maintain anonymity as just a capacity, right? Not even the illusion of privacy, then there are no such things really in the end in this architecture of oppression as consent of the governed. You're just a population. You're just an individual in a population being herded around, led like a bull with a ring in your nose. These are really dark times in that sense, but at the same time, we can focus on what's left and really bolster it. So there's all these new tools like Himless coming out from the Pirate Bay guys, secure messaging, more secure email projects, and they're being crowdfunded. So, and it's like you said, there is a sea change. The public has shifted its opinion about this. It's amazing what Snowden was able to do. So we're going to ride this wave of anxiety and hopefully produce tools as a kind of fanfare for the common man. If you want to have anonymity and financial freedom of speech, tools like the dark wallet will be there for you. And God willing, we can preserve ourselves into the next century.
I like that phrase, the fanfare of the common man. This is really a time in history where very few people are standing up for the interest of the commonwealth or the common man. And I think back just a few months ago with what happened with Aaron Swartz, who was very much fighting for the interest of the public domain, the interest of the common man, and he was hounded to death by the MPAA. He eventually killed himself as a result, as his father indicated, by the hounding from the MPAA or the government. But anyway, Cody Wilson, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks so much.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Cody Wilson, who is crowdfunding Dart Wallet. You can still contribute to that campaign. The more you give, the better it is, I guess, with your Bitcoins. If you'd like to get in touch with us, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.